Okay, everybody, we're going to look at just some key points from the public opinion and polling section. Go over some definition things. If you notice, there's a lot of stuff written in the notes section of the PowerPoint. Something to keep in mind. Okay, one of the central concepts that you should know, not only for this section, but for the next sections, is this idea of framing. Okay, this idea of what words you use to describe something, how you ask a question, and how that affects your perception of an issue, the words used to describe it, and how the questions asked affect how you answer the question. An example for later on, in our Women in Politics section, there's a part where we're going to talk about the sexual violence and the court cases and politics of rape. There's a case in 2010, a North Carolina Supreme Court case, that said, the Supreme Court of North Carolina said that once a woman gives consent, it's not rape, even if the man does not stop if the woman says no. So the woman is not allowed to withdraw consent during sex. So it starts out as consensual sex. It can't become rape because the woman initially consented. If you ask the question, can a woman withdraw consent? That sets up the burden of proof in a way that puts the impetus on the woman to prove, right, that she has the power in the situation to get somebody to stop doing things to her body. Whereas if instead you ask the question, can a man continue intercourse with a woman who has withdrawn consent? Now the burden of proof is on the man to prove that he should be allowed to continue to engage in sexual activity with a woman, even though the woman has told him no. Right? And you can think about this with a whole number of issues. That go on in today's society. Should gay people be allowed to marry? Should we prevent gay people from getting married? Or should we not allow gay people to get married? Should gay people be allowed to get married? You have to put forth an answer, or it implies at least an argument that you need to prove that gay people should be allowed to be married. Whereas should society be able to not allow gay people to get married, whatever the negative of that is? The answer to that has to be something of, what right do we have to prevent a gay or lesbian person from getting married? We have to, or society has to prove that. Kind of makes sense? Okay. So, framing matters. Oh, another good issue since we'll be talking about race and gender. This issue of aggression, acted aggressively, lunged, dove, versus reached. So, for example, what do I mean by why did I say all these words? Disproportionately in police reports and in descriptions of whatever the situation is, if a black person took an action, let's say they took an action that put their body from standing outside of a car, so then half of their body was leaned over into the car to grab something, that black person is disproportionately likely to be described as or to be viewed as lunging, diving into the car for something. He dove into the car to get a popsicle. He lunged into the car to grab a Twizzler or something, right? Aggressive actions would be used for especially young black males, whereas any white person of any age, he reached into the car and got a popsicle. She turned and leaned into the car to grab a Twizzler. See how the different ways of describing, you're describing the exact same thing, but the words you use to describe it create very different images in your mind of what's going on. So in the Michael Brown situation, there's been descriptions of lunged, of what else? Lunge, dove, being very, all the actions described as being very aggressive. Whereas walking towards somebody, if you're a white person, might be described as moved towards me or took a step in my direction. So think about this framing in political issues and in public opinion polling, and you can see how important this is also in this other field. All right. Sorry. So what do the American people want? The American people want us to cut taxes. If you can phrase the argument, if you're a politician, as I have the voice of the American people and the American people want blank, and you can define it that way, the other side of your argument is now having to defend why they want to do something the American people don't want done. Okay? Regardless of what anything else says, you'll always hear politicians say, the American people want blank. Doesn't matter who the American people voted for, what they say they want in polls, in exit polls, what they write into people. Each side will try and deliver their opinions as being on the side of the American people. Okay? Alright, so a couple of key things about how we form our opinions. How we form our attitudes, opinions, belief, known as political socialization. We are socialized politically based upon a number of things. One of the bigger factors is our family. Not only the internal family dynamics, but also how society interacts with our families. So if you are in the in group, the elite group in society of a family, elite I don't mean by like rich, smoke-filled cigar rooms, I just mean the normal, what's sort of identified as normal, white nuclear family household, then society treats you a little differently than if you're anything other than that, and that's going to affect your political socialization, right? If society, if you're not one of those families and society treats you with a little more hostility, it's going to affect the way you interact with society and, for example, the parties that you support. The way people change their minds politically, change their values and their attitudes, another important concept, it's not because of a specific, like, I'm going to deliver to you the perfect argument as to why you should all become communist, Marxist, zombie, Leninists, rich people haters. I'm going to deliver that argument to you right now. It's going to be perfect, flawless, and you're going to believe it. That's not going to happen. Even if I happen to have that perfect argument that was completely irrefutable, you're not going to change your opinion, at least overall in general. Most people aren't going to change their opinion based upon that one argument. Changing opinions takes time. You change somebody's opinion by becoming a trusted source of information in their lives, by forming relationships with them. You influence them over long periods of time, either by yourself or as part of a larger group, affect each other, and so that's how opinions get changed, basically. Okay. Priming is the one of two other important things I wanted to mention. Priming goes along with this issue of framing. Alright, so priming is getting somebody to think of something specific in their head before they answer a question or before they're answer a question. Priming gets somebody to have some type of emotional response or specific stereotype in their head. The example in class I gave was of that gender study where if you ask people, men and women, if they're good at math, everybody will rate themselves equally good and bad as math. You'll have the same distribution. Alright, however, if you ask them, are you a man or are you a woman first, and then you ask them, are you good at math, all of a sudden you see men rating themselves better at math than they did before, and women rating themselves worse at math than they did before. They became primed to think of if they're good at math within the concept or within the context of their gender, and that caused them to change their attitude about themselves. Alright, pause button there because food's ready. I'll be back. Okay, the last concept that I want to talk about is the push polling, because that's a lot of fun. So push polling, the goal of push polling is not to measure any results, but to get people to maybe raise certain concerns about a person or an issue, to plant seeds of doubt in somebody's head or in a particular voter's or demographic of voters' heads. Example of this is the push poll Bush did against McCain in South Carolina. Would you, what was it? If you found out McCain had fathered an illegitimate black child, would that change your opinion of him? Nobody cares if that would change their opinion of John McCain or not. What they care about is that it caused people to go, huh? They wouldn't be asking about this unless maybe John McCain had an illegitimate black child, and is that true? Or even if they're not thinking of it explicitly, they're now going, John McCain equals black people. And I'm in South Carolina. And I'm white and I'm old. So that's bad. That's what we're looking for at push polling. Push polling happens a lot in sort of partisan media outlets. They'll do those like text to answer this poll question. It might be something like, do you think, or if illegal immigrants had leprosy, would you support them coming into the country? People, aren't coming in this country and spreading leprosy and whatnot. But this was a favorite thing of Lou Dobbs to do, to try and stoke anti-immigrant feelings among the populace by, he talked about leprosy a lot. No reason, no evidence, nothing, no reason why leprosy should have come up in this conversation at all, except it's scary. And honestly, it'd be like talking about fire hydrants and immigrants, or pens and immigrants. It's that, like, not related. The sun and immigrants. What do you mean? Yeah, exactly. There's no connection. Anyway, okay. So, that's push polling. Now all of a sudden you're going, I wonder how many immigrants have leprosy or fire hydrants. And that's the effect of push polling. One sort of final concept about the Americans and attitudes and the value of large numbers and statistics. Any question you ask, you may find a fifth or so of people saying they think it's true. Was the U.S. government involved in 9/11? Do vaccines cause autism? Actually, both of those might be higher than the 1/5 to 1/4, which is unfortunate. Of course, the first one I point in, 25% of Americans believe the sun goes around the earth, is frightening also. 25% of 300 million is a lot. So when somebody says something like, 10 million Americans say this, it's like, holy cow, 10 million of us are that dumb? Well, yeah, but that represents, 3% or something? 0.3%, 1%? I don't know. Anyway, you can have these very large, shocking numbers, raw numbers, and it doesn't necessarily mean as much as it seems. You can also then connect this with like the deficit and spending and things like that. You can also have these percentages, but out of context, 25% seems like a lot. Within the context of this just seems to be the norm of ridiculous beliefs that people can hold. You're like, 25%, whatever, right? Now, onto the attitudes of Americans, we find there are some things we consistently find. Americans consistently support liberal programs, liberal governmental and social programs. However, They also support cutting government spending generally. They also support less regulations generally. They may say they support greater regulations on coal companies, but do you support less government regulations? Yes, I do. Do you support more regulations on coal companies? Yes, I do. You'll find Americans will say they support or oppose every single thing, even if they're mutually contradictory in some way. Which is why I put on there, do Americans want less taxes? Yes. Do Americans want more taxes? Yes. Do Americans want more government? Yes. Do they want less government? Yes. A lot of it all depends on how you frame it and the question being asked. Also, Americans can't see through how issues are being framed. And how, like, do you support more money for education? Yes, you do, but that doesn't connect with your idea that the government should spend less money. You want the government to spend less money and have less taxes, but you don't want the government to spend more money on education and have more taxes for education. Americans can't connect those two things together, lots of them, or at least lots of them do, so 1 in 4 are idiots, etc. Okay, that's a quick rundown of that.